Okay, so here is part 3 of the video, and I'm starting off here with the mushroom field, which is a big one to talk about. Uh, in the header here, it just has an update destroy, and then a placement of the grid, spawning mushrooms on that grid, killing it, checking for position, destroying mushrooms on the grid. If they're poison, if they're in the player area, killing all mushrooms. Things along that lines, and then making the grids right here in the private, the mush array of 3130, and int player just checks the top of the area. So within here, the destructor destroys everything inside the mushroom array. The update doesn't do anything here. Destroy doesn't do anything. Here, it makes the grid, so it makes the whole entire grid for rows, columns, and then if the row is greater than 0, which is that first line, do everything else. So that's how I don't have mushrooms on the top line, but the fleas can still spawn them there. And then this creates mushrooms in rows, columns, and then at the pointer of this. And then if they're within the R area, if mushroom area to R, it adds them, and then else it just zeroes it out. So there's a 0 in that position. Spawning of mushrooms this way also creates it. This creates mushrooms when Centipede dies. So it will spawn a mushroom instead of doing it the other way, which just does it at the beginning of the game. Kill mush position. This makes the position 0 when something is dead. Where if it checks if the position is not empty, and if it's true, then it makes that position 0. There's a little added measure there. And then this is the function to check whether or not that position is 0. So it checks if it is not 0. If there's something there that is true, if there's nothing, if the test is false, then it's false. Obviously, we'd want to return true. Mark for destroy mush. This just will destroy the mushrooms. And then mush poison does a test to get the poison, and it tells us whether or not the mushroom is poison or not. Mushroom player areas, how many mushrooms are in the player area. This is so the flea can check, so the flea knows whether or not it needs to come down or not to add more mushrooms. Kill all mushrooms just destroys every mushroom, sets everything to 0 upon the game starting. The score manager is the next thing to talk about, which has an enum, which it keeps track of all of the stats of the critters. One thing to note, I did not get the spider to give you different points depending on how far away it was, along with it showing up the number instead of when it died. So right now it always will give you 600 points, if I'm correct, for when you kill a spider. So this sets a score and a high score, and it has a pointer to the simple text demo. And in the CPP, what I'll show you is that it takes in the score tracker, and basically it equals the tracker, so every time something goes in, it gets the score. And if the high score is less than the score, high score is equal to score. So this will check that, this will basically make it, so if the score is higher than the score, then the high score will become the score. And then it does a point to the update score, which I showed you in the flyweight, which updates the score. Private add score, which is what I just went over. The add score. Get score is just setting the different variables for it. A pointer to the text demo, and then the reset score, which sets everything to 0. So that when the game restarts, you'll zero out your score. That way you can keep going to continue to play the game. So the way I had mine kind of working, at least how I imagined it, since it doesn't have the high score there, it's like a local high score, so the high score will only change if you're actually beating the high score there. If you don't, when you end the game, the high score will still be whatever it was. It's actually only the score that's changing. So it gives you the goal to beat the score that's been locally made. The Scorpion here, I have a collision with the bullet, or with the collision with the bullet and collision with the mushroom, which was to make the thing poison. that was just the best way I had to do it at the time, and I did not have enough time to end up changing it to check the thing instead of using collisions. So I'm sorry about that. Here is just the initializer, setting all the variables, the update, the draw, destroy, collision. Collision with the mushroom, like I said, it just makes the mushroom to poison. The collision with the bullet does all of this stuff. It creates the new death, stops the sound, destroys both of them, and then adds the score to the scorpion. Then initializing the scorpion again. The ship inside the bullet.h. It's just your typical bullet. It flies up really fast, draws, deletes. It draws and is recycled because of the factory, excuse me on that one. So there's a reference to the bullet factory, and on the update, if it's out of the screen here, then it destroys itself, but luckily then it gets recycled and you can keep reusing the bullet that way. The ship is where I have a little bit of ugly code, and I realize that fact. But that was just how I did it. That was the simplest way for me at the time. So I have a bunch of functions in here for when you push space to shoot the thing. Collisions with all of the different critters, except for the scorpion, because it should never get that far below. And impulses, so it can be controlled through a strategy pattern. And then it creates said strategy patterns and returns the AI strat. And then the Boolean for shoot here, which isn't actually used. It's only used in the other spot, I believe, but I could be wrong. That might be the only instance of a public variable. And then the other variables that are all needed. But in the ship, all of the includes for all the stuff that I needed to do, the initializer, or constructor, excuse me, setting all of the variables that I need to be set, the destroy, deregistering input, and then in the update, it gets the previous positions equaling to that position, sets an offset, so it has an offset, and that was for when the initial keyboard command tests. Then now I have it checking the impulse, which I can show you once I go through my strats. The clamps clamp you within the area, and then it just takes your position to what these variables are. So this keeps you inside the player area. And then impulse is a little bit of friction, so it just augments how you move. And then when you shoot, it just checks if the keyboard is spacebar, and if you're shooting, if you are, then the bullet comes out. And that's just happened in the bullet factory. Collision with widget isn't something that happens anymore because that was in your game. I just never gotten rid of that code. And then collision with spider, I'm only going to go over one of these because the next 4 functions are all the same, and this was the bad part that I was talking about. So they call the exact same stuff for when they die, because the exact same stuff should die. I know the correct way would have done this would be make another separate class for this and just call that class's function within each of the collisions. Unfortunately, and I'm sorry that I did not do that, but it sets the other for destroy, and then it sets your death animation. Gets the position, it repairs all mushrooms, it creates a death strat, which I will go over once I get to the strategies, and then it kills all spiders, all fleas, all scorpions, kills all bodies, kills all heads. And that's sort of where that error is happening, where I'm killing something when I die, and that's why the noise is still going off. And then it sets my lives down to 1, and when my lives is 0, then it goes back to the attractor mode, and then it returns to the return to AI strat is a function that I'll show you at the bottom of this. And that basically checks if lives is 0. Go to the AI strat now. From here, the collision, like I said, with all of those are exactly the same. And that I understand is bad, but that was just the way I had done it. If it collides with a mushroom, it just stops it and basically sets you back to your previous position so you don't move. And the impulse is set up for each way you move. Getting the position of the ship, getting the sprite, and then creating the AI strat, and basically creating the AI strat, creates the AI strat, destroys the ship strat, and then under the death strat, it creates the death. Same thing happens for the create the player strat. Then when you create the death strat, you get rid of both of the other two, and you set a Boolean to be false, for when you want to use the death strat. So it basically destroys both of them. The initialize function, and then return to strat. So if the lives is equal to 0, it creates the AI strat again. Sets the pointer to death strat to 0 again because you want to null it out when you start. You have it to be the attractor strat. You reset all the waves, and then you have the sound to be quiet, which is one thing that I know didn't work. And then you set your lives back to 3. Ship explosion was from your game. I did not use that. Sound manager. The sound manager, not too tricky. It just basically sets all of the sounds to play, which ones to play basically, at a volume of 1 because it's pretty loud. It's also a singleton, and it just loads in all the sounds. And in this, and the things here are public. These are the functions to play each of the sounds and to stop all the sounds. In the CPP, I mean, this will be long, just quick to go through, but it basically sets each of them to play. And then further down, it sets the bass strat, and then it sets the ones to stop, which are the ones that I'm looking to do. So that's just how that works. And then the stop all stops all sounds in the game. Nothing too complicated about that one. For the sound, it kind of just calls back and forth with the strategy pattern. The spawn manager is relatively simple. It just has functions to spawn each of the things. And then it also sets the time for each of the timers. I know you said you didn't want the timers in there, but I didn't want to have to change what I had done initially to figure out how alarms worked being so close to the final due date, so this is what it was. Basically, it sets all of the stuff that I get from Wave Manager, which I'll go over in a couple of files. From there, it goes down into an update function, which basically checks if the times are equal to 0 or if the mushrooms in the player are equal to a set number that you can check from the file. Then it plays the sound and it creates the flea or the spider or the scorpion, the respective sense. It's a lot of if statements I understand to be inside the update, but that was the way that I had it working originally. And the spawn flea just basically spawns it in a random spot up on the top row. Scorpion does a random area in the top third of the screen, and the spider does it in a random area, only going from either left to left or right to right, and moving up and down there. Spawn centipede spawns the centipede at the top of the screen. Start wave starts the wave. You call start wave to spawn the centipede and play a new centipede beat. And then here sets all the timers so I can get them. Spider. Here is once again the spider critter. It's an enum for the movement, whether it's going up, down, left, up, or angle up, ankle down. All the stuff, kill all spiders. And everything there. In here is basically just constructor, the update. Sorry, I lost my spot. Update with what position it's going or whether it's on screen or off screen. It knows to destroy it. Also checks the update so it knows whether or not that area is empty, so it knows to destroy it or not. So if it is empty, then it wants to mark it for destroy, or if it ends up hitting it, it wants to mark it for destroy. And this is basically just doing the movement in the update. I realize that's bad and it shouldn't have been like that, but it calls the movement change at the end. Collision with the mushroom just destroys it. I know you said collision with things are just bad, but that was the way I had it originally. Like I said, it calls the middle score always. I didn't have code to check how far the distance was, and then this just decides what way you go depending on what case gets end up called, and the initialize for when more spiders are made. And then I was talking here about in the Wave Manager, this code gets a little bit disgusting too, just because a lot of it's just copy and pasted, but it's for reading all the stats. It has a struct with stats in it. For every stat that I read from the file, It's also a singleton, and then it has it reads the stats, switches waves, checks the current heads, and then it has current stats, which is why can't I think of it right now? Just a variable, and then the stats, and then it sets the things and resets the waves. So in the wave manager, I'll go through a lot of this quickly because a lot of it, like I said, is the same till we get to the bottom. At the top here, it just says it begins stats, the string is set to 0, and then it sets the current stats to wave 1, and basically keeps running this while loop, one for each wave, and as long as it's not equal to wave 2, then it keeps running it, and basically it goes through and gets every single one. So if the current string is equal to centipede length, so it checks the name of it, then it will go through and convert the number on the next line to be the number that you're grabbing. So that's just how that works, and that works for all of them. And then some of them check true or false because you can't take out true or false because it's a Boolean and convert it to an int. So it's basically, if it's true, it's 1. If it's false, it's 0. And that was just what it was looking for true or false. Like I said, I'm going to skip most of this because it's a lot of the same stuff. It's just doing it 3 times because there's 3 different waves. And then once you hit your third wave, you keep doing the other wave again and again and again, the third and final wave. The switch wave here does, if current stats is equal to wave 1, set it to wave 2. Then if it's set to 2, it gets set to 3. And then once it's 3, else is also just going to be setting it to 3 because it's just going to keep doing that wave 3. And then it does, it points to the start wave thing, which was a thing I talked about a second ago where it calls the centipede, spawn centipede. So it's getting the new stats, and then it's creating the centipede based off those stats. And then head check checks how many heads are alive. If there's 0 heads alive, then it goes to the next wave, which is where I was saying I was having that issue before where when you die, it deletes all the head and bodies on the screen, so the head would be equal to 0, which therefore it would call switch wave. So when you die, that's how it theoretically changes your wave from wave 1 to wave 2. And then reset waves just changes it back to wave 1 when the game is over. That's the end of my part 3 video, and in my part 4 I'm going to go through all of my structs, and that will be that.